I can't hear you. Okay, so I know that you've done something to improve the sound system, but I'm just saying as a person who needs hearing aids, that it's not improved. So
Thank you for that.
it's,
As a partner in crime.
yes, it sort of leaves out a segment of the population.
And I just wondered, is it hard to hear all of us?
Pretty much.
Even me with this voice? You can't hear me as well, because I have a loud voice.
I can't hear David at all, and I can't hear Rick.
Okay, thank you. I just thought that'd
And I
be good for
can't
us.
hear Mr. Valentine.
I've heard that before. I wear hearing aids too, and I crank them up before I come to a meeting. But I've heard that it's harder to hear from the audience than it is up here, so we're getting a different perspective in.
Yes, I appreciate that. I can hear you when I do the meeting online, but I can't hear you in here. So, okay, thanks.
Let us know.
Yeah, hi, there's me, there's no sound reinforcement in this room. I don't know why these speakers are pointing down, so there is nothing to amplify your voices to those of us who are here. So this is for all, whoever did this, it needs to be done. Well, okay, that was it.
We have a couple things. Is there any action that the board wants to take? Oh, I'm sorry. Bill, I didn't see your hand.
Don't run it from Second Street.
Yeah, so given the fact that you can't hear up there, would you guys please try to project? Sure. Some of you are impossible to hear, and the person standing at the podium, nobody can hear me at all. You know, I can't hear people standing here and talking to you. I mean, it's messed up. I want to really thank Ms. Smith for bringing up the thing about the mayor pro tem and who's running the meeting. And I just want to say, there's a lot riding on you guys to be your own board. And there's so much Kool-Aid that's coming your way. And Mr. Knudsen sitting down on the assumption that he would run this meeting tonight is a good example of a glass of Kool-Aid. And I hope you don't really like it. But he's not the mayor pro tem. And the statute is clear that if there isn't a mayor pro tem, the board decides who's going to run the meeting. And we're really counting on you guys to not be passengers here and to you know, be the board. So thank you. Can you please project?
Yes, sir. Does the board want to take any action on what we've heard?
Yeah, let's fix it.
I think it's worth saying the IT subcommittee has this item, this matter on its agenda.
And then, is there any?
Right. Sorry about that.
So that was the IT subcommittee. We'll take that under advisement about the hearing issue and the audio.
It's already on our agenda.
I probably like to do a little discussion before I make a motion, but I think the first gentleman who let us know that 2 Paonia residents are graduating from the Naval Academy is pretty amazing. So I don't know what we do as a set of trustees, or if a letter of commendation can be drafted signed by the mayor. I don't know. I guess I'm turning to the administrator to know if there is something we could do to acknowledge their achievement and if it's appropriate.
You just make a motion for the letter to be approved, and administration would draft a letter.
Well, I wanted to know mostly, is a letter the appropriate thing to do? We wouldn't want to take it to a resolution. I wouldn't, or not a proclamation. A proclamation is a more overarching thing than a letter. So I move that we ask the staff to draft a letter to both of the Paonia residents graduating from the Naval Academy for the mayor's signature.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second.
So there's a motion on the table that the staff draft a letter for the mayor's signature congratulating these 2 young men. Was it Air Force or Naval? Naval.
I'd like to add to that we make sure that gets it to the paper.
Good idea.
Want to amend the motion?
Yes, second the amendment.
So the motion's been made and seconded to get this into the paper also. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So now we're going
Start
back.
with the amendment and go back to the original.
So the original motion was that we composed a letter. Is there any further discussion from the board? Any discussion from the public? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now we move to the consent agenda. It includes the regular minutes from May 12th, the liquor license renewal for 133 LLC, West Elf Wine and Spirits. Is there a motion?
I have a correction for the minutes on page 21, add an R to the word treasure. I know Cindy's a treasurer, but she treasurer too.
And I have a proposed change to the minutes, and that is for Corinne to be signing each set of minutes as the clerk. Simply because the clerk has the responsibility for keeping all of the activities in the meetings of the trustees. So I would, and I don't know if we need a motion for that, but that it would be the more appropriate signatory.
Why don't you put that in form?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that Corinne Ferguson as clerk signs each of the current meeting minutes and all future meeting minutes as she is clerk.
Is there a second? It's been made and seconded that Corinne sign as clerk any minutes from tonight onward. Any discussion from the board? Any discussion from the public? All those in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Okay, that motion carries.
I'd like to point out on the West Elk liquor license renewal that they're the only liquor store in the area that wasn't busted by a sting operation by the Colorado Department of Revenue. They really run a tight ship.
So it's a feather in their hat.
Yeah,
Anything else on the consent agenda? Could I have a motion for that with the corrections that we've made?
I move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
I'll second that. Okay. Any discussion from the board? Motion's been made and seconded to approve the items on the consent agenda with corrections. Any discussion from the board? Any discussion from the public? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. We'll move into staff reports. Town administrator? Yeah, I have it. So I just want to get the staff reports. Yes, please do.
All right, so as we had not had a staff report, an opportunity to present the last two meetings, I did include the written report from the previous meeting. Some additional information to provide to the board. I have here. First wanted to let the board know that I had a conversation with Delta County Emergency Management. And there is, it's called a co-swap grant, excuse me. I opened it up so I could tell you what that meant, and then of course I closed it. Get that for you real quick. So what I can tell you is that it is out of the Department of Natural Resources, and co-swap started after the 2020 wildfires that we experienced. And so it's the Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program. And the county is applying for a grant. This is that there would be no cost or commitment for the town. But as part of that, they were considering high priority areas as recommended from the fire department and discussed with the town. And the high priority area that they designated in our area is P Hill, Cedar Hill, being an area that has the towers on it and things like that, that you could take out a lot of ability for people to contact and be in communications if there was a fire. And there's, of course, with the cemetery and other things in that area. So they are working on that grant right now. That area will be included, and should they receive the grant, will be notified. No work would actually begin to take place if it's awarded until late this year or early spring next year. The police, yes.
I just want, could you describe what kind of work they would have to do?
They have a team, I believe it's about 20 individuals that come out and they do fire breaks. They come in and just cut down brush and weeds and dead things and create fire breaks. Definitely would be one. I can get more information, ask someone from the fire department to provide more information on that if you're interested in that. I know it's about 20 people. I believe it's a group that they work with and they use, it's one of the community service programs that they do with inmates. And the fire department and inmates do it together. I spoke with James Plum Starnes at JDS Hydro. I was able to watch a little bit of your meeting last night after I got home. And one of the things that came up was just some question about receiving just a clear, easy to understand answer from JDS on what they would like to see when it comes to the clock plant, the 1 million plant. The data that he stated he would like to see is June through November, because that's high demand, low spring production. It's a good window, it's 6 months of task A on the status update that they provided, which is the inflow and spillage. He said he doesn't need production numbers from the 1 million. They have usage numbers and demand numbers from the 2, but that's what he needs for the next start and the next phase of the reporting. And he said that he just always wanted me to remind the board that that is also subject to other improvements that are under consideration. So there's other items that they're looking at, but if they can just start getting that data. And we know we can start collecting that data with our meters that are already installed. And so that's something I plan to discuss with our water and wastewater individuals, our operators and our ORC, so that they start collecting that beginning with June through November, if that is, if the board is comfortable with that direction.
So in other words, raw water will be run through the treatment plant, not treated, run through the 1 million gallon plant and not put into the tank, run in and run out so you can get inflow and outflow.
Yes, so instead of spilling before it goes through the meter up higher, which is where it's spilling, it's going to come down through the plant and then spill.
And is the plant ready to be run January or June 1st?
As far as spilling,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
but not distribution.
Right.
Yes.
Well, the reason I ask is when we went up Friday to the plant, there was some discussion that some of the, I don't know if they are flanges or what I'm going to say washers, for lack of knowing a better term, that to be sure that those are operational and that everything there haven't been any cracks from anything drying out.
Right.
So we do know from doing some test runs that there will not be any surprise leaks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Where are we gonna spill the water?
German Creek. It's right
German
behind.
Creek?
Yeah.
Are we gonna have any problems with flooding or water trespass? Because we flood somebody, we're liable.
No, we already have 100 gallons a minute going into German Creek, and
Okay.
I suspect we can increase the flow to 400 tops, but I don't think there's gonna be an issue.
400 gallons a minute?
Yeah.
Okay, that's not a lot of water. Okay.
That's it shouldn't work.
Anything else, Karen?
Let me see. I did provide, let's see, I wanted to let the board know after, it's been mentioned several times in the meetings, and I did go back and look through previous resolutions going back to about 2000 for any fees and times things were, anytime any fee was assessed. And I was not able to find where or when the banner permit fee started, but it isn't reflected in any resolution for fees. So I've had 2 banner permit applications come in since this discussion began. I did not assess a fee for those banner permits and wanted to bring that to the board's attention and would be an item of, I would assume, for future discussion when we look at our fees and whether we want to start charging for the banner or not. Let's see, is there anything else that I did answer a few questions for Trustee Markle. I met with Jeremiah Jordan and I met with Steve Thomas. And he provided some additional information, showed us how the software he uses to create the asset management plan works.
Scott Thomas?
Scott Thomas, sorry, I said Steve, didn't I? That's a different person. You. And we talked about he showed us how the asset management plan software works and how when he completes that information, he'll actually turn that over so that the town will be able to continue to utilize it, populate it, and modify it with information moving forward. It's not just a single moment in time and then an unusable document once we move into future years. He discussed the JDS and SGM reports and what components he felt he could add to those reports and what they provided. We gave him all of the GIS mapping so he can start implementing that information into the asset management software. And we're waiting now from him to send us a list of the other items that he would request. He said once he receives those items from the town, he will need approximately 30 days to complete it. And then at that time, he would want to start bringing that to the board to start having conversations about priorities, fees, any billing questions, and how you can start actually playing with the program and tweaking it to hone in on that finalized asset management plan. And I believe that's all I have, unless anybody has questions. Oh, yes, I have that right here. I handed off my paper, I apologize. I did publish this, I sent it to KVNF and the newspapers as well, and it's on the website. Sent it to the board, and we have flyers out so that people can get them. The announcement that we'll host a meet and greet open house for the final candidates for the Paonia Chief of Police position. It's Tuesday, May 31st, 4 to 6 p.m. here at Town Hall.
So we encourage citizens to go to this. The last one I heard of for the town was town administrator, and I was the only resident that showed up.
Yes.
So we'd like to see a number of people help us with the decision for police chief.
Yes, our recruiter said today, the worst thing that he sees happen in communities is you have these people come and they come to do a meet and greet and 2 people show up. And that's always disheartening. They'll be here also the day before for the holiday and have been given information about the West Oak wine, our wine trails map, information about our restaurants, different things we've used for other events in town. They're going to tour the schools, really do a lot of on-site touring and looking around the area. They've been provided maps for doing the trails. So,
And perhaps for the public, he could describe the decision-making process for the hiring and how we'll know how many candidates.
There's 4 candidates. There's a 3-piece process prior to the open house. And there's an interview process. There's what we call an inbox. It's a scenario. They're provided a scenario. And that scenario they're actually doing with public safety from other communities. Our former chief is not one of them that's involved in this process. And our recruiter, he will be part of that inbox program with them. They'll have some one-on-one time that I will be with them. And then they will have their open community meet and greet where there will be some boxes for suggestion boxes and notations, cards, things like that. And we really ask people to think about what you would like to know from your chief of police, what you would like to see in them, ask them those questions and make sure to provide feedback and comments, because the information provided from the board, from their opportunity to meet and greet with them, as well as the information from the community is weighted pretty heavily on the sheet, not just how they interview in a constructed environment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions to the administrator from the board? Thomas?
On packet page 31, additional information, you say a board Delaware County Commissioner meeting is scheduled for Monday, June 6th to discuss the North Fork Airport Advisory Committee. Is that a board of trustees board?
Yes.
Okay. And my understanding is that there are some changes proposed by the county for the airport committees. And that
didn't watch the whole meeting, but I remember hearing that they were waiting on us. And this was as of last month.
Which that was inaccurate. So the statement that was made at the airport, at the meeting, at the commissioner meeting, and then when we followed up with the meeting that we asked for, they had stated that they were waiting to hear back from the board on what direction they wanted to take. But if you'll recall, the commissioner and the county attorney came to a board meeting, and Commissioner Kuntz and the town manager, Robbie LaValle, came to the meeting, and when the board specifically asked, what do you want us to look at? What are we looking at? They said nothing. We just, we should talk about it. So, yep, that was.
Sorry, I missed their visit.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Oh, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this, so then when the resolution went on to, we were advised that there was a resolution on the county commissioner's agenda to dissolve the airport advisory committee, and just give back to the town to create our own for the North Fork Valley and for the North Fork Airport. We asked the commissioners please not to do that and to table that discussion until such a time that they could meet with our board and have a larger conversation.
So will that be designated as a special meeting?
It will be because the full board could potentially attend, but it's at the Maloney House in Hotchkiss.
So I was on that committee way back when the basic function of it was the county wanted us to cough up money for the year. And we said no.
Thank you. Nice to have a historical perspective. Did you have anything else?
I have several questions on page 30 of the packet, but I also wanted to follow up to the 4 candidates being here, and I understand 1 is in-house.
Yes.
And 3 are traveling here, and I just was curious. I emailed you with the question of the budget we're using, the cost to have those officers or those candidates come here.
Yes.
How much we're spending.
I don't have an exact number. We have requested from them. We only have 1 individual who's flying, and we're reimbursing for half of the flight at his request. 1 individual that will have a rental car, and then it's mileage for the other individual because he lives in the state of Colorado. So it's very minimal. When it's all said and done, I would anticipate it's probably less than $1,500.
So they have hotel and.
Yes.
Food. Thank you. I have some questions on the existing page 30. And the first is, my notes. I was curious if first of all, this is not on page 30, but can you tell me what the repairs are going on 2nd and Oak Street right now? The repair on 2nd and Oak at that intersection?
That's not a town. I believe that's a sewer, private sewer issue.
That was up on Rio Grande.
I'm trying to.
This is right on 2nd and Oak.
Fire.
Yeah, near the fire
The
station.
fire
Yeah.
department. I'm sorry. I was trying to think of a repair we were doing. No, that's the fire department is tying into their fire hydrant that's behind the fire department.
Thank you. And then I was curious, what are the changes that Dole is talking about for technical services for new state mandates for sewer regulations? Is that storm sewer?
No.
Or our wastewater sewer?
So there is it's still a grant, but it's technical services is free to the town. And so what it is it provides a technical memorandum. And actually, I just got an email with some information about it, not a half an hour before we came in here. So let me go to that real quick and I can thank you. Okay.
And I bring it up because we've talked so much about what might have to happen out at the sewer plants.
So,
I'm curious.
and that's exactly where this came from. JDS Hydro and DOLA, through the conversations at a meeting, said, hey, let's talk about this. And so Dana Levac, our representative, and I met with Desiree Santieri with DOLA. She handles most of their a lot of their grants for our area. And JDS, and we talked about it. And so as far as wastewater, it really was exactly that. It was looking at our wastewater plant and starting to think about the changes that are coming down in the next several years from the state and how we can start planning for those now, what it's going to cost, exactly what we might have to do, and how all of that fits in and ties in well with the Turner Ditch and Lone Cabin. We were talking about things like constructed wetlands and different things like that, because things that 15 years ago, the state would have balked at, now they're more open to. So it would include things like that. And let me see here. There are also a couple of things they were thinking about on the water side that might also tie in. And I'd be happy to forward that to you. They don't specify in this email what they were, but there's an attachment that lines them out in each one, and I can send that to you.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see it, just to understand, because what it means is there is something coming.
Yes.
We are going to have to figure out how to pay for
Yes.
some kind of upgrades to the
Yes.
sewer treatment. So I think that the more we know now, that would be great. Thank you so much for that information. And I have already emailed about this and the trustees have seen it, but I was surprised to see that our attorney Conklin was putting together a standard services contract for the SGM proposals. And when I went back and listened to that meeting, that was not done under board direction that I could see, unless it was done at a later meeting, and I don't recall.
Yeah.
But I would like to make a motion at this time about attorney, the time that the attorney is taking. And I know it's on, and maybe I'll wait, since we have it
On the next agenda.
I'll wait to the next agenda, because I'm concerned about our attorney is doing work that has not been instructed by the board. Memos.
So if I could provide some clarification on that. The contract was not, he was not drafting a contract for SGM. This is a general services contract that we would use for anyone, any vendor, any contractor that the town was going to contract with. And this was what, you're right, there was not a board motion. It was just basically a discussion that I've spoken with the administrator about doing a general contract so that it has everything in it that we need on the town side, and then their proposals and things like that would be attachments. So that's the contract that was, he didn't draft a contract for SGM or anything like that. He provided a template, a standard template.
Okay, and which I think we need, but again, I feel like.
I can provide a little additional comment on that. Yeah, there was, I know, some discussion over the use of what form of contractors would be entering when they were providing services to the town. There were cases where it was simply a proposal being provided by a contractor that was being signed off on. I believe I had suggested to the board that we prepare a standard professional services agreement to use in those instances that would contain the terms that are appropriate for municipal contracting and would be protections to the town. And so that's what we put together, was that form agreement. And then, with the appropriate amendments to incorporate the specific SGM proposals that will likely be coming to you at your next meeting.
Thank you for that. But I'll wait for the echo to stop. Again, I just get to the I think we need more consideration of board direction, simply because we pay you a lot of money, and not that you're not worth it, but I think we need to be more aware as board and staff of that. And again, we have a motion coming up on that. And I have one more comment on this, on page 30, and it has to do with this exact topic. And it is that you met via Zoom with Attorney Conklin and his colleague, Richard Peterson Kremer, and Dan Reardon regarding the draft of building code ordinance update to include review of building zoning changes made in 2017. Again, that was not done under board direction. And I really feel like this could be a very expensive endeavor. And
Could I interject?
Sure.
I think there was there's been board direction about getting the building codes up to date so that we can do a contract with the city of Delta. And so that's been on the table for quite a while and frustrated a lot of us that it hasn't moved forward. So at least in my case, I was glad to see that.
right, and I understand that needs to be done, but there was not a board vote taken to again have our attorney spend time on this, because I think this is bigger than we can afford our attorney to do. And I feel like it needs a board discussion.
So the board directed our previous town attorney, Attorney Nerlin, to do this, to draft the ordinance. So I'm sorry, Trustee Merkel, it might. You do it, I'm just trying to find out if I'm missing something. So it was assigned to our previous town attorney by the board to draft the ordinance so that we could modify our building code and adopt it. And so when that task was handed off to Attorney Conklin and Carp New Hanlon, we met with him to go over, and his associate, I believe, Richard Peterson Kremer, is the one who's working on it primarily. We met with them and went over what had been done, what was provided, what attachments, and gave them that information so they could finalize the draft for the codification ordinance update.
So Paige, this problem with legal doing things without board direction occurred under Mayor Schliederman. And we actually set up policies by which the board had more control over when legal would be called in. And that's what I'd like to propose at the next meeting.
Okay, well, this is just an example of, and what I want to say is I understand that there's two parts to this. One is that we would like to adopt by reference 2018 International Building Code, which is not as huge a fix as all of the building zoning ordinance that was made it's a mess. It's a Gordonian knot that needs to be untied. And that seems like a much bigger project that I think we need to talk about. And thank you.
If I may, just really quickly on that, I think it would be really great if the board can, prioritize the things that it would like for me to work on. So we're, working within the budget and accomplishing all the goals that the board would like to see accomplished. Just specifically on these building code items, I will say again, I think this was directed for us to do from prior to our time as the town attorney and working through kind of the other onboarding matters that we did over the last couple of months. It was just a timing thing as to now when we're able to address this. And the adopting these international codes is not as easy as just saying we adopt them. There are a number of local amendments and other changes recommended by your building official that we're working through. We've recently done this for a number of our other municipal clients. So we do should be pretty efficient in putting this together. And this is, unless the board directs otherwise, expected to come to you guys at your second meeting in June.
Can I ask how much time you've spent?
I've spent not a lot of time on it, but Richard is being the associate in my office who has been the primary drafter on this for our other clients, would be carrying most of the load on this. So I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I don't expect it to be a massive undertaking, but it will be more than an hour or two of work.
Thank you.
I have a suggestion that we adopt the International Building Code. And then if the building department or the building official has problems, amendments or anything else that he wants on that, we go ahead and address those individually when they're brought to the board or a committee. And the committee brings it to the board. We can't be spending our legal fund completely on this. And it can, haven't been a builder for 45 years. You can easily blow the entire legal budget for the entire year on this single issue. So I think we're going to have to do some work ourselves with that. And the best way to do it is we go ahead and adopt it and then have the committee, have the building official or citizens or board members go ahead and bring up issues that they want to discuss to a committee, I think is the best way. And then we adopt them as a council. We don't adopt them without consulting the attorney, but it can be sent to the attorney. It can be reviewed in a very short period of time and cost much less money.
So do you want to make a motion to that effect?
With all due respect,
It's probably something that should go on the next agenda.
You're right, Rick. It's better to let the experts deal with it. We just take what's in the adopted code and then just let situations as they arise, modified that code rather than presume we know everything about it.
We have someone in the audience, but let me finish the discussion with the board, and then I know our, so is there anything else from the board on this? Jeff? Go ahead.
If I may, your code with the adoption, I believe it's still 2003, maybe international codes. There are an existing number of amendments to those. I think many of the ones in the upcoming draft will be carryovers and those recommended by your building official. It's up to you guys how you'd like to proceed. I would recommend allowing us to complete this project and think it would probably be far more efficient for us to do it in this manner, kind of in one fell swoop to adopt these 2018 codes with those amendments, including the updates to the energy code, rather than do it piecemeal over time. That's my recommendation.
We have a hand up in the audience. Can I finish the board first?
My suggestion is that we set a budget for legal consultation on this, and that's it. It's going to get out of control, and building codes and building rules, they explode so fast. You can spend literally days on it, and I have. So the best thing to do is, let's cut this snippet in the bud. We can't just let an unlimited amount of time go to the legal fund.
We have a staff member here that I'd like to hear from.
Yeah, and I'm not disputing anything you're saying about.
And identify yourself.
Dan Reardon, I'm working as the building official for the town. And I'm not disputing anything you're saying as a town board giving direction for how to spend money. That's not what I'm here to say. But I am here to say that this process started years ago, literally. And the town of Paonia signed an agreement with Town of Ridgeway, Montrose, Cedar Ridge, Orchard City, and all these others to get this code adoption underway and have similar amendments so that a builder in Paonia that's building in Hotchkiss or Cedar Ridge or Delta would not have different rules for every town they go to. Paonia was the first town we started with, and you are the last town to adopt these codes. All the footwork has been done. We've had 2 formal meetings here with town. I work with your town attorney in Parachute. We adopted the very same codes there. This will be a very efficient project and process. And I had only spent 30 minutes on a Zoom meeting discussing this with your town attorney. He's well versed in this. We're well underway, and we've had public input. And so, to adopt it cold turkey the way it is, and you're asking for a lot of trouble because we've amended it to be friendly to your town. We've said, we don't want fire sprinklers. We don't want this. We don't want that. We're trying to make it much more user-friendly, and I'm happy to give you the proposed amendments if you have not seen them. But this has been years in the process. So please don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We've done a lot of work already, and no one's spending money just willy-nilly for the town. So.
Well, if we have everything on paper, let's just bring it to the board and we'll adopt it. The thing is that doing this piecemeal, and that's kind of where it's going. We tried to adopt the building code when I was on the council last time, almost 20 years ago. And this is just, it's crazy. We just need to do it and get it done.
It was ready over a year ago. So
let's bring it before.
Again, the work's been done. Certainly you need to be brought up to speed and so forth, but please don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, there's been a lot of work toward this, and it's friendly toward your community.
I'd like to make a comment that I was on the Government Affairs Public Safety Committee when Dan first did his analysis, and it was very thorough. It went into our code. We had public hearings on it, and the document itself did 90% of the legwork. So it's merely a legal review, not a deep dive in embedding. So I'm pretty confident it's not going to turn into a nightmare, but if I'm wrong. Okay. Any other?
I was wondering, is it appropriate to make a motion to have this, what sounds like a pretty finalized draft that's what's
Coming June 8th.
Oh, it's coming June 8th?
Yes.
Second,
Is that what I heard?
Already on the next meeting.
it's on the second meeting.
Second meeting.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's good. I guess that was what you're gonna do was
Yep,
make it happen.
thank you.
Great. So anything else on the town administrator's report from the board? Anything?
I have one last, actually, I have two things.
Okay.
This other one is at the bottom of page 30, and I'm curious about the meeting with Greg Coulter at the wastewater plant. If there were any big surprises that he presented.
It didn't occur.
It's coming tomorrow.
Oh, it's tomorrow. Okay,
He-
all right.
He was supposed to have been,
Okay.
but he didn't.
All right. Then on page 30 into 31, we had asked that we see the insurance policy for town employees using town vehicles for personal use. And I feel like we need to talk about that a little bit because I don't know if what's your policy is, can town employees take their trucks home
The ones that are on call,
that are okay?
yes.
So let me just read what's in the, hold on one second. I went into hang on, the employee handbook and what it said. So essentially you have to provide, here it is, I'm sorry, right in front of me. So town vehicles may be used only for the purposes and in the manner authorized by the town administrator. Only authorized, qualified, and licensed employees may operate town vehicles. Only authorized town employees and other persons may ride as passengers in town vehicles. And there were some clauses in the CIRSA insurance information, which made it sound like they were saying it was okay to have non-employees in a town vehicle.
I forwarded the full, well, and their insurance, the insurance policy might say something different than the town's policy as far as who they would and wouldn't cover. But the information, what I was asked to provide was to get a statement from CIRSA on whether or not they'd be covered. And I did also receive a request to send the entire, it in its entirety instead of just the copied part. So I did forward that email just this evening.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
but we don't typically, staff's not supposed to be driving with people that aren't
Right.
town employees.
So I want to make sure, I did not get that impression from reading even how the coverage that the town has solely, the town's coverage, did not look like, it looked like we could be held responsible if they had somebody in their car. So I want to make sure that town employees that are on call know that no one can be in the car.
Right,
And is it a select few people that can take them home?
yes, it's the officer that's on call.
Mhm.
So if there's one or two officers, whichever ones are on call for the off hours, so overnight, they take a vehicle home. Our public works director drives his vehicle home. He's always on call. And one, I don't even think you do.
I don't take it home.
I was
just
saying,
go to the
you
yard.
leave it at the shop, yeah,
Right.
so
Okay,
that's
so just
the
really
only,
Okay,
sometimes three, depends on the officers that are on call. There sometimes more than one.
okay. Well, and I think it's good to know simply because if somebody's driving by, a citizen sees a town vehicle outside of town parked on someone's private property.
Right.
I think we need to, if we get a call, we need to understand that. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Anything else in the board on the administrative report? I can't say we're making much progress. We're an hour into the meeting. We've covered the first two agenda items. I will make a call to the public on the administrator's report if anyone wants to make a comment. Suzanne?
Suzanne Watson. So not to beat a dead horse, but this meet with Zoom with Conklin and the building official. This is kind of a pretty vague, like, bunch of words here, because it says to include review of building / zoning changes made in 2017. And I'd like to know exactly, what do you mean by that? It sounds like Dave Knudsen is saying that we've done this extensively, But I think you're talking about something other than building/zoning changes made in 2017. Yes, exactly. And so I'm assuming you're talking about the Ken Knight dump of this zoning ordinances into the building code.
That was part of the conversation.
Okay, and I'd like to suggest this does not go to the attorney. This goes to the planning commission. The planning commission is responsible for the zoning code. And they actually should never have let it get dumped out. But it's made a very lengthy and cumbersome building code that has gutted our zoning code. And we don't need to spend money on attorneys to look into this. All we need to do is restore the zoning code to what it was. It was the land development regulations that were initially adopted in 2002, 2003, whatever it was. And it was massacred by the zoning commission and Ken Knight and the staff in 2017. And you do not need attorney's review for this. You just need to put it back. Just take the ordinances that were removed and put them back and start from there. And it will make your chapter 18 much shorter, much easier to understand. And we'll have land use regulations again that pertain to steep slope development, floodplain development, solar access protection. These are all zoning issues. They're not actually the physical construction of building. They have to do with how people use their land. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
Shereen Patterson, Rio Grande Avenue. This is a question regarding the airport meetings with the commissioners, which are coming up again on June 6th. As I understood it from the Zoom meeting, which was a couple of weeks ago, with the commissioners, and it's not just a question of they're asking for money from North Fork. They're asking, what does Paonia want to do with this airport?
I was referring to previous, but we did previous, yes.
At the previous meeting that they had, the commissioners, they were deciding on if we split it, you might have misunderstood, if they split the board, the airport advisory board, that is now Delta County and includes Paonia, they want to split it because nobody is responding to them from Paonia with any ideas how to use that airport. It is an amazing resource and we tell them nothing, there's nothing. So at the Zoom meeting, there was Schreiderman that said he's going to come up, he was caught with his pants down, sorry, and was going to bring a report, bring some ideas, but has anybody heard that at all? Not yet. So their meeting is coming up on June 6th. That's a valuable resource. It'd be nice if somebody put a little bit of thought into what our contribution is to that.
Thank you. Moving on to unfinished business. Resolution 07-2022, appointment of officers.
I'd like to make a motion for to start with just one of the 4 positions. And my motion is I move to split the administrator clerk into 2 separate positions.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to split the administrative clerk into 2 separate positions. Discussion from the board.
Well, historically, when we've tried to give one person 2 jobs, it caused problems. Scott Leon was both the director of public works and also the police chief, and neither job got done thoroughly. I'm worried about overload on a single person, and that it'd be good to have that split into 2 different people. Also, it would allow the more oversight because you'd have both a clerk and an administrator looking at problems in the town rather than just one person.
John, do you have comments?
Yeah, I think that this topic has been on my mind. And I think that one of the key things that disadvantages of having one person do 2 jobs, aside from making part of the person, is making that person available, those positions available. Because if you have 2 individuals who can tag out and be present physically in an office, say, it makes it a much better service to the community when someone's there. Whereas if it's a single person, when they're not available, both the administrator and the clerk are not available. Right? So I think that it makes a lot of sense.
Rick, any comments on it?
No.
Okay. Yes.
I actually, Corinne and I have had this conversation. And I was very clear to Corinne in that conversation that I felt like it was unfair to her to be asked to do 2 full-time jobs. And I brought to her problems that I had seen with public notices, some ordinance not being used as it should. And to me, if you have a separate person for the clerk, they are by statute responsible for keeping a true and accurate record of the board's proceedings, as well as any rules or ordinance passed, and to perform other duties as prescribed by ordinance. The clerk oversees the public records requests. The clerk is the official custodian of all records centrally maintained in the town, and the clerk is the official custodian of email. And by having Corinne do both jobs, we have lost the statutorily designed checks and balances of good governance. To have the clerk be one person and the administrator another person, those 2 people should be able to confer. If Corinne has a question about ordinance, she should be able to confer with the clerk. Corinne shouldn't have to worry about getting a public notice published properly. That should be the clerk's job and the clerk's job only. And I think it's been a disservice to the town to have Corinne doing 2 full-time jobs because things are falling through the cracks, honestly. And I've already described to Corinne what's fallen through the cracks. So that is the reason I make this motion. And one of the last things I wanted to bring up is that statute requires that the clerk live in town. And I know Corinne has moved out of town. We were not notified of that fact, which we should have been as clerk and based on statute. And what it says in the statute is that when any officer ceases to reside within the limits of the town, he may be removed from the office pursuant to this section. Now, that is a may, so that is very much at our discretion. But I just want to bring up that that is what's in stellate, and we were not notified that you moved. I'm not saying it's a deal breaker, but I just want to point that out.
Well, and what I would say to that is, first, a good question that would be one that we might have to have an attorney provide information. Is that one of those things that the town can modify? Because our policy says that nobody that works for the town has to live within the town limits. So that is a good question. And that's the first time I've ever heard that town of Cedar Ridge clerk lives in Delta. So, it's a good question. I would like to provide my thought on separating positions and just state very clearly to the board that I don't disagree. I think that they should be 2 positions, but before the town board makes a decision to remove me as the clerk and retain me as the administrator with a contract that's coming up, expiring this year as administrator, and in my contract agreement where I have the opportunity for either position, I think I would request that the board have an actual conversation, whether it be an executive session, and discuss the 2 positions and where the majority of the board sees me better fit. Is it stepping down from the clerk position and remaining as an administrator? Is it returning to the clerk position and hiring an administrator? Or is it the majority of the board who just does not want me to work here?
Questions?
So it sounds obvious, but I just want to confirm, we're talking about hiring an entirely new position full-time.
Correct.
And it's a little troubling for unending discussion about saving money and spending too much that we're going to do this. The arguments presented are good. I understand and am compelled by those arguments, but that sounds like the sort of arguments that should be made for a larger municipality. And we clearly don't have unlimited resources. We've expressed that again and again.
I have noticed that Candy's taking minutes. Like Candy's taking minutes. It's a task that Corinne used to do as clerk.
And there are other things that I think I've seen, and I don't know if it's average or just how I came into board meetings, but that's tasks that Ken Knight used to do. He used to keep time, but I've seen those tasks hired out already. So I think that I don't disagree that having one person do 2 jobs is a way to save money, but I think that at the end of the day, that work still needs to get done, and it's been hired out. We just hired more people.
Good.
And Mary has her hand up.
And I further don't disagree that having the 2 positions separated is a bad thing. I think having a clerk and a town administrator would be very beneficial. However, as Mr. Valentine said, budgetarily, we don't have the money. We're talking a median range for a clerk. Well, the range for a clerk for a town of our size is between $58,760 a year and $82,160 a year. And if you look at that, if we just take a median of all of that with benefits, we're talking about a position that we need to fund at $104,369 a year. There is no way we have hired out $50,000 worth of work to somebody else to support Corinne. I don't believe that's true. So I think the plan forward should be, we budget this in the 2023 budget. We say we're going to split the positions, and then we can decide if Corinne's going to serve as town administrator or as clerk. But we budget it, and then we move forward with hiring after we have a 2023 budget where the money is there. The money is not there this year. Thank you.
So historically, we've had both the clerk and the town manager split. And historically, we had only 4 people in the front office. We had a manager, we had a clerk, we had a deputy clerk, and we had a bookkeeper. So it only took 4 people to run the town.
And I'd like to respond to the budget question and whether should we wait. And I honestly think we need to split this position and do it soon. And we can find the money. We're finding the money to pay for physical plant, sewer, water. We can find the money to do that, but we're not going to need the money right away. And I think the sooner we do it, the sooner Corinne can focus on the water sewer. These are things that only Corinne can supervise, our current ORC and the staff doing this. And we have so much that needs to get done that I really would rather she be spending her time on those physical plant things and not as clerk. And we will find the money. There is an open position right now. The public utilities director has been open and is not being filled to its full capacity. We would have to do a budget amendment to move money from one budget category to the other, but we can do that. And I've been screaming about a meeting to go over the budget as it is. This is very doable, and it would serve the town so much better to have someone taking care of the clerk duties and let Corinne concentrate on administrative duties. And with that in mind, I have a second motion, but I can't do it. I'm just telling you, I have a second motion to address this, but after we get done with this, if we go with this approach.
Comments from the board.
I don't think we can compare failing infrastructure, excuse me, failing infrastructure to the luxury of having another staff person.
Other comments from the board? Other comments from the public regarding this? See 2, okay. Bill, do you want to come up?
Sorry, I think you're blowing it. I think Corinne's a much better clerk than she is administrator. To hear you talk about putting Corinne in charge, rebuilding the infrastructure gives me chills. She was in charge of the infrastructure while Mr. Loper ignored it to the point of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of emergency work. I think you need to go into executive session and have a serious discussion among yourselves about what's going on in this town. I think, I'll say it, most of the stuff that's been wasting the board's time for 2 years has been Corinne's mistakes. So thank you.
Thank you. Suzanne? And we have a hand from the public
Did you?
right after you.
Okay. So it does sound like Corinne brought some options up that she'd like to discuss, so I do think that should be discussed. I want to talk about the salary range that Mary Bachman just stated. If you look at what clerks, I mean, we're comparing ourselves to other towns, but we don't have trained clerks like other towns. People become professional clerks with international certification. I mean, this is really a serious career. Do we see this happening here? So when we say these kind of inflated salaries, I don't think we're comparing apples to apples. And this is something that perhaps Corinne would like to look at, becoming a professional certified clerk. You know, I don't know. That's a discussion you'd have to have with her. It sounded like these were things that she wanted you to consider. And I do think you need to start now looking at hiring a town administrator, because Corinne's contract ends at the end of the year, but you have to give her a decision by December 1st if you do keep her as town administrator. And this process takes a while. You need to find money in your budget to start, because when you keep kicking the ball down and there's the can down the road, there's always another set of financial challenges. You know, you just need to just bite the bullet and do it. Thanks.
Thank you. I see a hand from the public. Michelle. Shy.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, they can.
Okay, great. I just wanted to remind the board that right now the question in front of you on your agenda is the appointment of officers. And it sounds from the discussion like you're not ready to appoint a clerk tonight, that there needs to be more conversation. So I think it's just a matter of creating an agenda item or a special meeting and then moving on for tonight. You got a lot on the agenda.
Thank you.
I think it's interesting that we have Frederick Zimmer, Chairman Creek Drive. We have a member of the public advising the board as to how to proceed. I think seems just funny to me. But in general, I just want to comment that for balance, that Mr. Bruner's comments are way too general, and that's his point of view. And I don't think it's fair for him to get up here and make a gross generalization like it's a fact and add that to the public discussion.
Thank you.
Marilyn Talbot, 4th Street. I wanted to agree with this last gentleman that the previous gentleman's comment is an opinion and doesn't speak for the whole town. That I don't agree that everything is Corinne's fault. And I was just wondering where, when you say like we'll find the money, just want to know where.
Thank you.
Christina Patterson. I think in a way you have to look at it holistically, and I appreciate Trustee Marco what he asked for, which was the comprehensive list of who works here, what their job titles were, and then just really figure out what's needed here. Thank you.
So we have a number of comments on the motion we have on the table right now involves splitting that job, and it seems there from the comments I've heard. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah.
I want to make sure I understand the motion. So the town clerk and the town administrator are already two separate offices. They're just being filled by one person. And so I want to make sure there's clarity as to what on the motion, because there may also be employment implications and contractual implications depending on what you are intending by the motion. And so if you could restate it and perhaps explain it a bit more, I think that might be helpful for prior to action.
Stated motion was I moved to appoint, or I moved to split the administrator clerk into two separate positions. And maybe I should add to be filled by two separate people.
What I see here is that in essence, we're going to remove Corinne from one job or the other, which is a personnel decision. I suggest that that needs to be taken into executive session, discussed, and it should not be a public discussion.
You know, Rick, as to how we split that, I think I agree. That has to go into executive session. Right. But the fact of not have one person try to accomplish two jobs, I think that's something we can resolve here now, because that doesn't actually, okay, you got it.
It's already split up into two jobs.
It is, but one person's trying to do two jobs.
Right, and basically we're firing Corinne from one job or the other. And we need to do that in executive session.
So if my understanding is correct, it's the employee that can decide whether we go into executive session or whether we do this in public. And I heard, if I heard correctly, you suggested yourself an executive session as one of the options.
Yeah. That as an option, yes, that I think that this does, I think it's deserves to hear from the board what their overall perspective is on what they would like to see, as well as to be honest, speaking for my own self, I also, as the employee who's worked for the town for an extremely long time and served the town prior, I would like to have the board talk to me about it before they make a decision.
Yeah, I think that's wise. The other thing, we just had a training session for all council members this last week. And the person from the state that was doing our training session suggested that the board's responsibility is to set clear expectations for each. And if we're going to separate the positions, our first step is going to be to do that. And then our next step would be to figure out the personnel ramifications of that. So there's a lot of pieces that have to fall into place in order to do this. But there is a motion on the table to separate those two positions and has been seconded. If there's no further comment, I'll call the question, except for Jeff.
Again, if I may, these are already two separate offices of the town. So the motion would be to create the two separate offices, but I guess, but just because Corinne is currently appointed and by contract serving these two positions, I guess with the successful motion, she would continue in both of those roles. And as was mentioned by a few comments, an appropriate way to pursue, I think, splitting having two different persons fill these two positions would begin with that budget process and take it one step at a time. The agenda item is for the appointment of officers, including to the town clerk position. And so I do fear that we're getting a bit astray if there's going to be some implied consequence from any, or at least that's the intent with a motion such as this. So having said all that, there may be a more measured way to kind of go about accomplishing the end goal of what I hear everyone stating here. And so those are my comments.
So one possible revision of the motion, I would ask the person making the motion that you make a motion to begin the process of separating the positions. Well, I'm just trying to get to the point where we have attention to some of the comments we've had.
Right. If I can say, I did this just to start the conversation, but I have a second motion which would allow a reappointment with caveats.
Okay. The resolution as it sits, 07-2022, does state that she will have both positions. So we're committed once we adopt that resolution. So the resolution is not going to happen tonight at all. And it would need to be rewritten. I think we need to actually go ahead and divide these positions up to two different people and then go ahead and deal with it from there. In other words, start the process by dividing them up. Don't get lost in employment and don't get lost in contracts, which went defunct as of May, 30 days after the election. The contract with Corinne is no longer valid. Okay, that's because the state statute states that. And well, no, I'm not going to defer to them. I'm going to defer to reality. Okay, here's what it states. It says the Board of Trustees shall afford a clerk, treasurer, and town attorney, or shall provide by ordinance for the election of such officers, and may appoint such other officers, including a town administrator, as it deems necessary for the good governance of the corporation. No appointment of any officer shall continue beyond 30 days after compliance with section 31-4-401 by members of the succeeding Board of Trustees. In other words, CRS section 31-4-304 preempts any contracts that might have been signed onto a future board.
Jeff, comments?
I think there is, as I've mentioned in prior meeting, I believe, there is an officer, an appointment of an officer and that relationship created there, and there's an employment relationship that can be separately created. And we have employees that in some cases fill these officer position roles. I believe it was circulated that, or came up in perhaps prior discussion, that there is excerpt, and it was contained in the SERSA handbook, a provision about officers basically there's a legal view that officers may hold over office until subsequent officers are appointed, because there's a public interest in seeing that those officers' positions are filled. Now, I will say that this provision of the statute is somewhat antiquated, and this entire discussion kind of points to that, because there are these overlapping issues related to employment law. In my view, this was something that was more so established in the territorial days of ensuring that there were people within towns, these political subdivisions of the state, that were, to ensure that they could function. And now, in the way local governments work and function now, we have employees, and we have, in some cases, employment contracts. And so I would disagree with that point of view. I would encourage you to nevertheless appoint officers within those timeframes laid out in statute to ensure that is completed. And again, recommend that if there's an interest in changing the existing organizational structure of town in terms of offices and who's filling them, that this be taken one step at a time, and that that's my comment.
The other thing, and this is a question for Mr. Conklin. So if we were to approve the resolution as it's written, 6 months from now, can we amend it and appoint somebody else?
There is a process for removing officers by a majority vote of the board. It does. There is a procedure, I think, that requires a cause to do so. But again, I hate to keep saying this, but there are the appointment procedure and then the separate implications of employment law that are at play here don't often very well align themselves. But I guess the short answer would be that there is the ability to change who your appointed officers are over time, and as you know, under appropriate circumstances and with appropriate procedure.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the table. I keep going back to that. And this would separate the positions in that, in essence, move us toward trying to get separate positions. That what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's my intent.
Any further comment?
Yes. I might add one more thing that, and this is done relatively amicably, because Corinne's contract clearly says if she chooses not to be administrator, she can revert to clerk. But in this case, again, I did not make the declaration of which is which. That was part of the trustee discussion and with the attorney. And I just feel like for our good governance, we need to make a change. And whether we need to go into executive session or Corinne, wants to think about it, because again, if this passes, I have a secondary motion to continue our discussion of reappointments. We will see if the attorney agrees with my motion, though.
And before we do, Bill, I wanted to clear up with our attorney exactly how it works. And we're not getting into the mechanics of, whether this vote is valid or not. So in essence, we have 6 trustees and we have a mayor. We stay with trustee vote and the mayor breaks the tie. That's a question for you, Jeff.
Yeah, you have, yes, all trustees, including trustee Knudsen, even while you're serving as mayor pro tem, you still get the vote, and then the mayor, her duty of chairing the meeting is filled by you, but her ability to vote to break a tie still exists by her presence at the meeting.
Okay, I just wanted, thank you. I wanted to clear that up before the vote was taken. So are we ready to call the question? Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. So we have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Stelter,
Nay.
trustee Markle,
Aye.
trustee Knudsen,
Nay.
trustee Weber,
Aye.
trustee Smith,
Aye.
trustee Valentine.
Nay.
So we have found we have a vote, 5 vote. We defer to the mayor.
And the mayor votes nay for budgetary reasons.
So that motion fails. One question I have for the board is we do have a resolution in front of us, and there is a judge appointment and there's an attorney appointment. Could we at least do those 2 appointments?
Resolution has to be rewritten.
Just those 4 entries, or are you saying any of the whereas? I mean, I've not read
We
it
can't
close
pass a
enough.
resolution without modifying it?
We can amend it.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I'd also like to just ask, it's my recollection that we had a motion to appoint Cindy as treasurer that was tabled, so we could get advice from our attorney. Did we get that advice?
No.
So that's what I thought. So in consideration of that.
That's the 2.
Right.
We could have a motion just for those 2 as an amended resolution, so at least we get the judge and the, I'm sorry, I'm speaking so quiet. We could have a resolution that could be amended so that at least the judge and the attorney are appointed tonight. We've gotten those officers out of the way. So that's what I'm calling the board, if you're willing to make that.
Okay, so I make the motion that resolution 07/2022 be amended to only approve the municipal judge. Municipal judge.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion from the board? Dave, please.
Okay, we're going to talk about reducing legal expenses next time around. I think we can just cut another resolution at that time if we're all satisfied with each other.
Could you say that last part again? I had a hard time hearing that big
Okay, so
last part of your statement.
on the next board meeting, we will be addressing legal expense, reducing legal expenses. I think at that time, once we've got policies in place and Jeffrey Conklin's agreeable to them, that we can go ahead and do resolution to appoint him.
We hear the rationale for the amendment. Any other discussion from the board? Any discussion from the public?
As long as you talk about officer appointments, I'd like to say you're missing one, that your code that's adopted by reference was just the International Building Code. It says your building official is appointed by the chief appointing authority of the jurisdiction. That's you guys. And Dan Marion was never appointed. He never took an oath of office. So I question if he's even a building official. So you might want to add that to your resolution. Thanks.
That's true, Suzanne. We have previously appointed the building.
So the motion's on the table to approve resolution 07-2022, the appointment of officers for the municipal judge. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No.
Okay, so one vote. Did you get that, Ken? Okay. Any additional motion for resolution 7-2022? Should we move to the next one?
Should we go ahead and go with the building inspector? We've done that historically. But
it wasn't agendized.
It wasn't an agenda, yeah. And also, under Title 31, we appoint the town administrator, and I don't see that in this resolution. So that's missing also.
I'd like to make a suggestion that the board call for an executive session with the lawyer on employment and this particular resolution. And we have an executive session at our next meeting. Is someone willing to make that motion? Because it seems like we need a lot of guidance.
You can make that motion as the mayor pro tem.
Okay, well, I'd like to make a motion that we schedule an executive session for the next meeting for time with our attorney to understand the ramifications of the officers, the appointment of officers, and the deadlines. Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Discussion from the board.
I'm in agreement.
Clear discussion. Anything from the public?
I have one question.
PORED?
It's about these appointments. If it's a appointed position, is that allowed in executive session? I understand contracts are.
Yeah.
But are public appointments executive session material? And I don't know. And that's why I'm not telling you.
So-
You can just ask.
Defer to Jeff.
Okay.
Suzanne, I was going to bring that up.
Okay.
What it says for going into executive session, it says motion is for discussion of a personnel matter under CRS 24-6-4022F and not involving any specific employees who requested discussion of the matter. An open session, any member of this body or any elected official, appointment of any person to fill an office of this body or an elected official or personnel policies that do not require discussion of matters personal to particular employees. The key thing in here is the appointment of any person to fill an office is not allowed.
If I heard the question correctly, it was, is this an appropriate purpose to enter, or no action can be taken in executive session. I wasn't sure if that was the question, is whether this was to take some sort of action, but my understanding of what Mayor Pro Tem was requesting an executive session for was to have some further discussion as to the legal issues related to appointment versus employment issues for each of the appointed persons, or to otherwise address legal issues related to those appointment procedures. If there are truly personnel matters that are for discussion in executive session with respect to a particular employee, as was just read, that would require the notice to that employee, and if the employee requests that be done in an open session, then it be done.
What it does say is that we can't go into an executive session to discuss an appointment of any person to fill an office. We could talk about personnel issues. In other words, does Corinne really want to have one job or the other? That kind of thing. But we can't actually talk about the appointment.
Can I have one thing? I'm wondering if actually this might work, because the conversation we had last meeting that we did not complete was Cindy Jones being called the treasurer, and the problem came up as from a personnel issue. Could she become could she be treasurer who answers to the board as opposed to finance officer who is an employee and answers to the administrator? So that was another question that came up with your other attorney. I believe he brought it up. And that's still an open question. And it doesn't have to do with Cindy in particular. It has to do with how do we get a treasurer position overseen by the trustees? Could that be done in executive session?
So again, it's the actual appointment of who is going to be appointed is, I think, the what's precluded in the executive session. The questions related to the organizational structure of your town, and with in that finance director position and the treasurer position, and any potential legal changes to the organizational structure, I think we could address in executive session, or I'm happy to provide, if you, at your request, kind of any direction on that in the open meeting as well.
If I could, I want to mention the reason I had the executive session is not for the personnel end as much as receiving legal advice from our attorney, which is one of the issues that we can go into executive session for.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so that's the purpose of that executive session, for us to receive legal advice.
But are we crossing the line into personnel?
Well, here's where we need to be disciplined as a board.
Yeah.
If we're crossing the line into personnel issues, then we need to set a second executive session for those very personnel issues. And the employee has to indicate whether the person involved indicates whether they want an executive session or public discussion.
Well, I feel like the question I just asked Jeff, that we are strictly talking about the position, not the person. He made it sound like, no, we could not do that in executive session.
You can't appoint, if I'm here.
Right.
Discuss the appointment.
No. But I would want to get legal advice as to how can we keep it fair? And so that's what I was asking. Can we get legal advice as to whether we can confer oversight of an employee to the trustees? Is that something that's more legalese as opposed to personnel?
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, there are personnel issues, I think, intertwined in that a bit if you're talking about with a particular person, but I think that if the structure of the conversation is really about the organizational structure in the employment positions created and the appointed positions created. So I feel comfortable advising on that those in general terms in the executive session, in an executive session if requested.
Did everyone hear that response? Because I did.
Oh, I did, but.
Okay, what did he say?
He said that if we were strictly talking about appointment of positions, that it's okay. And go ahead, Jeff. I'm not paraphrasing very well.
No, it's if we're talking about, if we want to try to remove an employment position from the town and have it only as an appointed office, and the legal issues that might arise from doing that, in general terms, we can discuss that in executive session.
Okay, and that was the issue your stand-in had last meeting. So I think that seems reasonable.
Yeah, and I've discussed that with him, and happy to address it with you all.
So we have a motion?
Motion on the table to go into executive session.
Is it, wait, I'm sorry, is this the
hearing legal advice regarding appointments? Legal advice regarding the appointments.
And is that to have that at the
So that's
next
the
meeting?
motion. It was seconded,
Okay.
correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Okay, one opposition. Did you get that, Ken?
So,
Let's see.
so, ready right now?
Yeah. No, this is a future meeting, right?
Next meeting.
Because we need our lawyer to prepare for the meeting. So, it is 8:15. I'm wondering if you would entertain a 5-minute break.
Make a motion for a 5-minute break.
Yeah. Motion, second, all in favor of a 5-minute break?
Aye.
Motion passes.
It's not on mine.
Open commission committees, letters of interest. Oh, mayor, okay, mayoral appointment to the finance committee. Thank you.
So I make a motion to table the mayor appointment to the finance committee as superseded by consideration of committees under new business.
Okay, is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion from the board.
If we're gonna redo, it doesn't make sense to put people on committees right now, then restructure the committees, pull them off, and then put them on. Need to consider how the committees are structured for the board.
Could I make a comment to that regard?
Yeah.
We only have myself and the mayor as signers right now. And what we're needing in reality, we could hold off the appointment, but we need to check something.
You are.
Well, we only have two and
yes.
That was the original reason to try and get someone, was to get another check signed, because we typically have two trustees and the mayor.
Okay, so would that hold out to the next meeting? I mean, sign enough checks to keep us alive?
Well, we can sign enough checks to keep you alive, yeah, but I just wanted to point out the rationale.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And traditionally, the finance committee had two trustees on it.
Correct.
And plus the mayor, and there was always three signers.
Yeah, good oversight. Okay, so the motion on the table is to table the mayoral appointment of the finance committee as it's superseded by consideration of committees under new business. Any comments from the public?
I agree. I think tabling this is a good idea, but when you bring it back, I'd like to see a resolution or ordinance that gives authority to the mayor to make these appointments. Thanks.
Okay, so the motion on it is table the mayoral appointment of the finance committee as it's superseded by committees under new business. Any other comments?
Can you read it? Did you say tabling?
Table the mayoral appointment to the finance committee. It does not list. So in other words, we could come back after we do the questions.
I'm questioning the use of the word table. Should be continued.
Okay.
Remember that? We learned that from Michelle Pattison.
Okay, the motion is.
Table is something that can be brought back to the table, right?
Oh, it's just to be continued to the next meeting. Yeah. Tabling, I
But do
think.
we understand when we say table?
Yes, I think so.
I think we're okay with the semantics, so all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so that passes unanimously. Then open commission committee seats.
I make a motion to table the open committee seats as it's superseded by consideration of committees under new business.
So we've used the word table again. Is there a second?
Second that.
Okay, so Rick seconds that. The motion is to table or continue open committee seats as it's superseded by consideration of committees under business. Any comments from the board?
My understanding is that both of these committees were created by ordinance. So I don't know how much leeway we might have regardless of what we decide to do with the remaining committees. I believe that these will stand as they are unless we want to revise ordinance. And additionally, this is an announcement of open committee seats. It's not appointment of any seats. So I feel comfortable with moving ahead with this at this time.
So most likely.
I'll be voting. Yeah, I'll be voting.
With that, I withdraw my second.
Is there anyone else that wishes a second? And the motion dies for lack of a second. So now we need a motion for open commission committee seats, letters of interest to the tree board and advisory water.
I make a motion that we direct town staff to advertise for letters of interest for the Paonia Tree Board and the Advisory Water Committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion from the board?
The reason why I made that previous motion was that if we go with full-blown water committee with all its historical authority, the advisory water committee will disappear. And so we can send out the letters, but they may be truncated by the next meeting.
Any other comments?
I believe the advisory board committee did exist at the same time as the public works committee at one point. So there was
collaboration. Basically, there still is so much to do, to talk about and discuss about specifically just water, that they wanted to move that out to a bigger group. So it makes the function.
So the motion on the table is to direct staff to publish letters of interest for the Paonia Tree Board and the advisory water. And that's been seconded. Is there any comment from the public?
I move to split that motion so that the Paonia Tree Board is considered separately from the advisory water.
Is there a second? That motion.
Second for discussion. Sure, second.
Why? I still think that the advisory water committee, Phil Seriani asked me at the beginning whether I wanted to be on the advisory water committee, and I said no, because it is the tendency of boards to ignore advice. It just, if you take an example, would be the county P&Z approved the solar power project, the county commissioners killed it, right? So I would like to see that in a committee that had more authority than merely advice. So that's my concern. But the Paonia Tree Board, I agree with entirely, and I've been on that.
So a motion's been made and seconded to take the amendment to the motion to take the advisory water committee off, to split off the advisory water committee. Any further discussion?
Don't we already have a motion on the floor? It hasn't
We can
been-
split.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Motion to split. It's not a motion to amend, it's a motion to split. So those two items would be considered separate if this passed.
Okay, any comments from the public? Is everyone thoroughly confused?
Yes.
Okay. I hope the board is not thoroughly confused about the vote you're about to take. So you're voting on a motion to split the advisory water committee off of this motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. So now back to the original motion.
No, now you go back to just take the Paonia Tree Board separate.
Right, and the motion made by Paige was that the staff be directed to solicit letters of interest to the Paonia Tree Board. That's the motion we have on the table, separating it out. Is there, so it's been seconded. Any comments from the public? Okay, thankfully, we can move on. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the advisory water committee will not make any decision on this, deferring to the committee.
Yeah, that split the motion, that means that one's taken up.
Okay.
Same motion.
So now, someone want to make a motion about the advisory water?
No, it's already been split and it's already the original motion.
Okay, I'm not understanding.
Yeah, so I guess the point of order is that the motion was split so that essentially they become two subsequent motions.
Okay.
One for the tree board, one for the water,
Okay, so
with the
now-
same language.
Okay, is that right?
Correct.
So let me see if I can state it and get through the cloud of my confusion. So this motion is that staff ask for letters of interest for the advisory water committee. And this has been seconded. Any further discussion from the board? Okay. Are you okay, Candy? Just want to make sure. Okay, anyone from the public? Okay, I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so one nay. You got that? Dave? And we have residential use classifications and review in C1, C2 districts.
Motion to propose.
Okay.
Would you like to open with a motion?
That's open. with a
All right, it
motion.
gets the discussion going. I move to initiate a special review for the Kennedy Building and a special review for the Masonic Building to be prepared concurrently and be overseen by an ad hoc committee of 2 trustees.
Is there a second? Second. Okay. Discussion from the board. Rationale, please.
Well, my rationale is that I feel like the ordinance used by the administrator during all of this is really not the ordinance that applies here. And this has to do with our core business district. In section 16-2-70, it is the intent of this district to provide for orderly development of those commercial and business uses, government, et cetera, characteristic of downtown areas, and promote comparison shopping and pedestrian activity in the core area. So from my reading of the ordinance and from my knowledge of the Cora documents that were requested by a citizen and I was able to review, I believe that because there are not living units in either of those buildings now, there may have been in the past, but if they're abandoned for a year, there is no use by right. And these are clearly multiple family dwellings being proposed for inclusion in the C1 district, which requires a special review. But I want to caveat with two things. The first is I am not against these living units going into downtown at all. And that's a special review does not preclude them going in. It just simply means that those things that we need to discuss and have on the record have been completely discussed in terms of not changing the downtown characteristics of our sole block that is the heart of the town of Paonia, which is what, to me, this ordinance was written for. And therefore, I believe it is in everyone's best interest to think about what can be done there. Off-street parking is my big concern. I think parking downtown is already hard, and we need to know where people are going to be parking off-street that are going to live there. That's just one of the many things in a special review. But we cannot, as trustees, allow this to go forward without full consideration of what we need to be thinking about to not change this business district and not create unintended consequences. Thank you.
I also agree that this has been a contentious issue, and I think the board should take the heat on it.
Comments, John? Any comments on this?
So can I ask clarification now? How do we know that these are multi-family dwellings? I understood they were fairly small. Or is that?
It means more than one in a single building.
Right. It's not multiple families. It's more than one dwelling unit in a building.
Right.
So multiple people are going to be living in multiple units.
Okay, we have a comment from Jeff and
if I may, I wanted to make sure I heard the motion correctly, Trustee Smith. So was the motion to initiate or require that the owners of these two properties submit a special use application in order to proceed with their proposed use for which a building permit's already been issued? Was that part of it? And then also to create a committee of some kind? I just want to make sure I understood the motion.
My motion was motion to initiate a special review for the Kennedy building and a special review for the Masonic building to be prepared concurrently and be overseen by an ad hoc committee of 2 trustees.
And if I may I inquire, would that committee, what is that committee tasked with doing?
Essentially, the committee would be overseeing the administrator doing the special review because it's the administrator's responsibility to conduct the special review. And frankly, I don't have full confidence in the administrator doing that, quite honestly. And I'd like to have trustee oversight. Sorry.
And us then taking the heat. That's my thing.
Yep.
I think
Yep, it
that
would take the heat.
if we make the decision, which is actually within our power to do on the special review, then we are responsible for all of the details of parking, whether or not that has been a abandoned usage, all the rest of those issues then become our.
If I may, as was stated in the memo I provided for the packet, to a certain extent, the ship may have sailed on some of those determinations. And if there's a requirement to redo this process, there's potential deprivation issue with the building permit that's issued. And so if you'd like some further discussion and legal advice on those issues, I'd be happy to provide it. It might be more appropriate in an executive session, which we could do now, if you wish, by motion to enter into an executive session to discuss legal issues related to special use requirements for these two properties.
Yeah, I appreciate and understand Jeff's concern, and I want to make sure that we're clear that essentially, I see a lot of liability in trying to revoke somebody's right to build that's already been issued. That said, it would be good to know that all of the I's have been dotted and the T's crossed in this process. And I also have copies of the bulk of the documents associated with these properties, and it does seem like there has been some things that may have been missed. So it would be good to hear the opinion of I think a committee or however this might shake out. I just want to be very cautious I don't think that we have any right whatsoever to revoke somebody's permit that's already been issued.
I agree. I don't think, we're not talking about revoking. We're just meant to make sure this is done right.
So if it's the motion, if I'm calling, and I'm sorry, did you have no comments about this? Mary, did you have comments?
I do, and it's about the process. So yes, the town administrator looks over the special review, but then it goes to the planning commission, and the planning commission makes a determination on the special review, and then it comes to the board. So in the end, the board does get the vote as to whether it passes or not. So I don't think we need an ad hoc committee of 2 trustees, because it's got 2 more steps before it's either gone or not. And I agree with Thomas. You know, if this is going to impact somebody's already given building permit, I think we're in deep trouble and asking for a lawsuit.
Historically, this would have gone through the streets committee, and we would have dealt with all of this stuff before the building permit was ever issued. So now what we want to do is go in after the fact and make sure it was all done correctly. We're not talking about revocation of the building. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is that all of the T's were crossed and all the I's were dotted.
So let me clarify. The motion calls for a special review. Legally, there is when you talk about special review, you're really taking it back. So I think what you really wanted is an analysis of the process.
It's just a review. If you want.
Yeah, special review.
I think we're getting hung on
semantics.
semantics.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Because the motion is a special review, which implies that it could be undone. So
okay.
I want to be careful.
Actually, in the ordinance, it doesn't say it can be undone. This is all out of ordinance. This is not, I did not make up the words.
Yeah.
So to me, first of all, there's been, and I believe, as I understand it, there's not been a permit issued for the upper story of Hayes. Is that correct?
The Kennedy building apartments don't need a building permit because they're not changing anything structurally. The apartments already exist as apartments upstairs.
Okay, but it's an abandoned use because they haven't been used in a year.
There's no such thing as an abandoned use.
Well,
that's when there's a use that's a variance, and after a variance that is granted and the use is abandoned for a year, it reverts. Similar to a Lady's, which was a restaurant on 2nd Street that Rick can speak to because it was his business with his wife. And it was in residential. It had a variance to operate as different things over time. The last thing it was a restaurant. And when they closed the restaurant, they had 12 months to sell it or reopen it as a restaurant, or it reverted because it was a variance that was received in a zone that it wasn't allowed in. The residences that are above the Kennedy building are apartments that have been in the building since the building was built in 1903 or 4, and were never an abandoned use. It just wasn't occupied.
Let me just read this, to me, the governing ordinance. Certain uses of land or buildings, sizes of lots or locations or sizes of structures may be found to be in existence at the time of the passage of the initial ordinance codified herein, which do not meet the requirements of this chapter. It is the intent of this article to allow the continuance of such nonconformance, but not to encourage its enlargement or to allow its continuance should the use be discontinued for a period of 1 year. Such nonconformance is declared to be incompatible with other uses in the district. So that is my assertion. The uses were discontinued. It's now reverts to multifamily dwellings into a C1. So that is just, I'm done arguing. I'm just telling you how I see it and why I wrote this ordinance, because I'm very concerned about the character of our downtown. I'm all for housing, but not at the risk of changing our sole district, our sole 1 block of commercial that is the gem of this town. And frankly, here is where I'm quite upset. We were told by Corinne that nobody asked about this. This is why it's now, you've thrown us under the bus, according, when I've read Corinne's. Okay, I'm sorry. So we have been told as trustees that it's our fault if it's too late for us to ask a question. If we don't ask the question and she's made a decision and we don't agree with it, it's too bad. And that's kind of what's been happening here. So based on everything that, I don't know if the rest of you have seen, and I wrote to Corinne on February 4th, expressing my concern that these required a special review. We went back and forth and she said to me, I will notify the contractor that they proceed at their own risk. I have no idea what you did. I was not provided in the court. So that's where we left it. I, as a trustee, was trying to get information so that we could try to ensure that our downtown is not detrimentally affected. So I'm done.
I'd like to just point out that we're having a discussion that gets into the details of this rather than what the motion is.
Okay.
And so if you could please restate the motion.
Okay. Let me find it. Oh, sorry. No, maybe not. Hold on. All right. I move to initiate a special review for the Kennedy Building and a special review for the Masonic Building to be prepared concurrently. And I'm going to say period. I amend my motion.
Okay. Is there a second for the amended motion?
I second it. There's other issues like parking and stuff that we've got to make sure is done correctly.
So that's part.
That's, yeah.
So does everyone understand the motion? Any comments from the public?
Good evening. My name is Brandon. I urge you to listen very closely to the attorney in the town. He is telling you, without telling you directly, that you are running in great legal peril when you do things that change the rules of the game while the game is being played. In essence, you cannot move the goalposts that have been set up before once the process is set in place. Procedural due process is nothing more than following the process and procedures that were set. Therefore, you cannot change things and you cannot reinterpret what is clearly what you just read. And that is, what you just read is a variance without saying variance. Your commissioner is correct and you are not, so I'm sorry. And so for that reason, and as an attorney, I can tell you are incorrect. You're incorrect. And also you're using information from a citizen who you've not named, and you're reading into the record of statements that you said was assisted in preparation by the citizen. That's a concern for the record that we're dealing with. This is a public hearing. And so what we're dealing with is a situation where we are running the risk of moving a due process right that has been set in stone, cannot be changed. You can't change things in the future going forward. And in fact, it's unclear to people here what is the actual process. So clearing it up is essential, no doubt about it. But I'm listening to the attorney, and he's telling me, do not do this. It is a huge issue that can cost a large amount of money, which is better used cleaning up our infrastructure, cleaning up our downtown, fixing things that need to be fixed, instead of trying to, once again, exert power where you have no authority to do so. And once again, he's telling you you're going to lose. So please listen to him. That's why he's suggesting an executive council. That's why he's suggesting you listen to him. That's what we're asking you to do today. Because if you do not, it's your peril, and you're putting the town at risk, because he's once again saying you're not correct. Thank you. Any other comments?
I think you should split the motion for the two different addresses, because I think you're looking at two different situations. The Kennedy building is underway and has been underway for some time. And I do believe, I've heard that they do have permits issued for the upstairs work they're doing. But I don't know if the Hayes Drug Building actually has permits issued for the apartment section. I know they were working in the store. I know, I didn't do the Cora, but I know people at Cora, and I know Corinne knows that there's been concerns about the upstairs apartments, as Trustee Smith mentioned. And I would hope that she didn't just go ahead and decide to do what she wanted to do, knowing the concerns. So I do think you might want to split the two motions, because one project is farther ahead than the other. I don't know the status of that steel deck, but I don't think anyone is ever allowed to build over town property, encroach on town property with anything. The town does not give its property. And if that was actually approved, I don't think the deck portion, I don't think you would suffer a lawsuit in that regard. But you could suffer a lawsuit if someone got hurt because of that. But to put private property over town property it's not allowed. And if this continues, you need to fire Corinne on the spot, because we can't be having these torturous things that divide the town here because of these mistakes that are happening behind the scenes. This town is very small, and we can't weather too many of these before we're just eviscerated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? No, please.
Thank you, Joe Ryder. Yeah, there is a process, and it wasn't followed. And I read through the administrator's report, the previous packet, her reasoning for the way she did it. And I find it totally off the mark. There's an ordinance. It's our ordinance 1390. It's the examination of code. It says that the code as written, there's an official copy in the office that's approved by the clerk and the mayor, and that shall be used by all courts of law, administrative tribunals, and all others concerned. And her line of reasoning included references to what people maybe thought that they were doing when this ordinance was changed to include this dwelling units by right as a shopkeeper's place to live. It doesn't matter what people thought they were passing. What matters is the law that's on the books. And the law on the books is very clear that in order to do multifamily, or in order to do a business venture apartment buildings, it requires a special review. You need to go through that. It's important. If this goes down in the way it's been slow walked to make it more difficult for you to do something about it, you might as well abandon the town zoning code altogether, because it's coming down to that. You guys need to own this, whichever way it goes. It's very important. So please do it.
A couple of points. I'm confused about the encroachment of a balcony when if you look up and down Grand Avenue, there are a number of structures that project over the sidewalk. Wouldn't be any different than what's already there, so that's confusing. I would offer, to your point of requesting a special review, that there is a process. So you may not personally agree with the way things were undertaken and reviewed, but they were reviewed. We have a building official, we have a town administrator. We have worked closely. I have to be the contractor, as you know, on both projects, and I have made sure all along the way that I'm doing what's being requested. So to your point of wanting to be more informed as to what may or may not have transpired, perhaps before it's a special review that has to be, you could go back through and really look at what has transpired. Check the building inspector's record, check Corinne's records. You could call me, we can have a conversation, but I think there's information there already because there are steps that have been taken. We've made efforts to follow the appropriate procedure. So that's one offer. And on my last note, because I just have to say, I would really encourage you to follow the legal advice of your attorney and not Mr. Berman. Just my personal opinion.
Any further comments from the board? Michelle.
Thank you. So I agree with the comments that were made that once a building permit is issued, you can't go back and revoke that. So I would suggest that you maybe change the language in the motion to not use the phrase special review, because that does have specific meaning in your code, what a special review entails, and that potentially it could be denied. So it's not really what you're up to at this point. I feel like it is a really good idea to review the process, the definitions, and make sure things are done in a way that the board expects and wants going forward. And I think what you probably could do is have a pause and have the administrator bring all requests for building permits to the board until that ad hoc committee completes the review. And you have clear definitions, clear process for everyone involved.
So thank you. Paige, were you thinking about actually triggering a full special review process? You're just looking for oversight by?
No, I was referring to a full special review.
Okay, so the motion
Just to
is a
clarify.
special review. I'd like to call the question.
Somebody to hand up.
Okay, I'm gonna call the question.
Okay, thank you.
Just more public comment.
Oh, there is more public comment?
I move to call the question. Get a second?
Second.
It takes two-thirds vote.
It takes 2/3 vote. We do have a member of the public.
All the questions stop. This is, we're not gonna be able to finish it.
I'm sorry.
Well,
No.
there's a vote. Yeah,
I'm sorry. I think we're taking way too much time on everything, and I'd like to move forward with our vote.
So the call for the question requires 2/3 vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So 1 nay. Okay. So again, the motion is about the special review. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So that motion passes. Okay. Next item. I've heard a lot of people talk about the policies and procedures, and I'm kind of going from the comments from the beginning of the meeting about the police officer thing, and I know that's been a thing.
Next thing, next up.
I think we need to skip it.
Okay. So the Board of Trustees team building retreat.
You don't want to skip it? I thought you were going to skip it.
Well, I was gonna skip it.
I just wanted-
Because people didn't say that was a high priority one. We had implementation of board committees, we had policies and procedures on police officers. People identified those as high priority items, not the one I just skipped. So could I please skip that?
Which one are you skipping? I'm sorry.
Skipping board retreat trustees team building.
Yes,
I just-
read to that.
I just want to give a short bit of history that, and that is in the year, around the year 2000, the town board decided they would have a board retreat at Snowmass paid for by the town. And they went over there, had an official meeting. Citizens, of course, were basically excluded, blew up in their face. Now, I'm glad to see that this board retreat came from Grand Junction back home. That issue is no longer problematic. Okay, so I'm fine with the board retreat, but you have to realize any citizen that wants to come in to our retreat it's open and welcome. And that's all I got to say.
Yes, but clear. Okay, so let's move on to the new business implementation of board committees. Dave, you're the one that made the motion on this, so could you help us out with this?
Okay, that I make a motion that the trustee committees be reconstituted as they were in 2002.
Okay, and if you could explain what that was.
In 2002, there were 6 committees with 2 trustees on each. There was a water sewer trash committee, a finance committee, a public safety committee, a streets committee, a personnel committee, and a parks committee. Each of these committees would pre-filter stuff. Tonight, a lot of the stuff that I saw happening, like this whole thing about the special review, that would have been handled by streets. I would have taken the heat off of Corinne, because she would have kicked it up to streets. Streets would have then gone in and done a review to determine whether a special review was needed. They would report it out to council, and council could vote on it. Each of these committees would, like when we talked about whether something was a legacy use of the park and all that, we went on for half hour, 45 minutes. The Parks Committee would have dealt with all that beforehand and then just brought the filtered results to the town. For the sake of efficiency and making the meetings go fast, these committees proved to be very effective for decades. And then they were abandoned for reasons, I think I know why they abandoned. I'm not going to go into. So I just want to go back to something that works because I think it makes us more efficient.
Other comments from the board?
I like the idea of it, but I would like to see each of the committees be codified in a resolution where it's clear what that committee will be doing and how they're going to report out. And I have to have copies of some of the previous ones, which are very good. So
let me interrupt for just a second. We have a motion. Did we get a second?
Oh, you don't have a second? I'll second.
Okay, good. So, sorry. So the motion is to reconstitute the committees that we had in 2002.
Could you say the names of them again, Dave?
Yeah.
Water, sewer, trash was one committee. Finance was another one. Public safety, which dealt just really with the police issues. Streets, which dealt with building codes, everything from street repair to any kind of issue that would impact the streets of the town. Personnel and parks.
There's no finance.
It is.
Well, there's finance. The 2 committees that took the most work were always water, sewer, trash, and finance. They were.
Okay, I didn't hear the first part. That's
okay. Water, sewer, and trash was actually one committee because it's one enterprise. Well, it's 2 enterprise funds, but it's one structure.
If I can make a comment, I know one of the reasons I was on the board when we abandoned the committees, and one of the problems with the public was that it seemed like business was being conducted outside of a regular council meeting. It was hard for citizens to attend. There was a request that there be postings of the meetings so that people know when they're happening, those kind of things, because part of it was about transparency. So that's why we abandoned it.
The committees always report their findings directly to the council. And the council makes the decision. I was very clear when I was on the water, sewer, trash committee and people came with the water issue to tell them that they were only talking to 2 trustees, that we did not have the power to make a decision. All we did was have the power to report.
Make a recommendation.
Make a recommendation and the board could follow it or not as it saw fit.
So there was no delegation of authority of the board.
The committees don't have any authority at all. All they are is a filter and a way of reducing the amount of work that the trustees in the bank have to carry.
Any other discussion? I'm sorry.
And one last thing, I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'm just going to read the first paragraph on this side. When I left in 2012, I asked each of the committee chairmen to actually write up the duties of that committee so that they could be carried forward. What did they have to do? And the very first part I always put in this, I was the only one that wrote them up, two of them, one for water, sewer, trash, and one for personnel. The purpose of the Water, Sewer, and Trash Committee is to assist the mayor and town staff with water, sewer, and trash issues. It should be noted that this committee is part of the legislative branch of town government, therefore does not have the authority to directly manage the public works department. That job is rightly performed by the mayor, the town manager, and the director of public works. Then I listed the duties of the committee. The committee is not tasked with micromanaging employees at all. It should have nothing to do with that. They're tasked with oversight. The Travis situation could have been solved very easily by a committee, because one of the things that water, sewer, trash thing provided the committee was to provide quality control for the water, sewer, and trash systems, inspecting facilities as needed. If that had been done, we wouldn't be in the mess we are now, trying to dig out of this hole with respect to our water system and our sewer system.
Any comments from the board comments?
I just want to, I guess, remind everybody or state that my understanding of the reason that the committee structure was abandoned was because there was a lot of management and basically work that was essentially, yeah, it was becoming like trustees were beginning to do work that should probably be done by staff. So in order to divide that, it was governance versus management was the theme. They just did away with it. I think that it probably was a mistake. And maybe as long as I'm totally fine with reinstating, I don't know what the structure number that you have here. I think it's probably a great place to start. I just want to be very careful that we stay away from, as you stated, doing work that should probably be done by staff.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Rick, any comments?
When I was on the council before, the committees worked well, but what you had to do all the time was remind people that we're not doing any decisions here. We're collecting information. And the other thing is that I think the town board could very well benefit from is we are here to set policy. We're not here to micromanage. And I see that we're kind of pushing that slippery slope. We need to make policy, but leave it at that. And if we have a problem, we need to deal with it on a individual basis and maybe even go into executive session for that kind of stuff. We're spending hours upon hours and not getting the work done we need to do. I'm suggesting that we're going to have another special meeting in order to take care of the business from this meeting. Yeah.
So, Rick, the very first item that's on the committee duties is develop water, sewer, and trash policies, drafting them through work sessions with the rest of the town board, and finally shepherd them into an ordinance. Right. So it's policies. That was oriented. Yes, pass that.
Any comments, John?
Sure. So what would we do to ensure that the transparency and mistrust issue didn't come back?
Because anything a committee does anything that a committee does has to be reported back to the board for decision. Anything that requires a decision. Some of the things that a committee does doesn't require a decision, like just simple oversight, going in to check to make sure that the water plant is running correctly, and that we could have solved this whole Travis problem. You could just walk in and saw leaking pipe on the ceiling, water on the floor, dead mice in the corner.
But the mistrust issue was perceived by the public. I think you're addressing how the board would have trust in the committees. That's but how about the issue with public?
I don't understand where the trust would occur. I guess I
could that articulate that sort of behind closed doors. And Dave, you might want to clarify this or.
I just made a comment that some members of the public felt that there was business being conducted outside of council meetings by committees. And that was part of the rationale. The other rationale was, of course, people getting too directive towards staff from those committees, myself included.
I'd like to read out two comments made by Michelle Pattison that she emailed to all of us and on the implementation of board committees, and I think there are two very good points. She says, I strongly urge the board to create a formal description of responsibilities, authority, and board expectations for any standing committee. I also suggest that all standing committee meetings should be noticed, public, and recorded.
Other comments from the board on this motion? Any comments from the public on this motion? I see two. Who wants to go first?
I thank Dave for his motion and the good intentions behind it. So I'm close to the right track. My own comments as one of the people who was critical of the way town business was being conducted, the way it seemed to be in this committees. It was overkill to get rid of all the committees. The function that I think the committee should have is oversight. And I think if you point your expectations a little bit to oversight, because I believe, I'm not sure exactly how the town administrator structure was when you were last on the board, but we went through a long time where there was no administrator. And the board took on that function, and that's not the way we work now. We have a staff that's supposed to do this stuff. And I kind of hear your proposal stepping on their toes, basically, or possibly stepping on their toes. And I think you should be careful with that. And you don't want to get into the situation where the board is doing lots of work to make up for an administrator that's maybe not quite up to speed. So I think, yes, you should have these committees, and yes, you should have oversight, but no, you shouldn't be doing managerial work. And I think the idea of recording the committee meetings, making it public, is probably a really good way to keep the whole thing in the open. So.
Yeah, I think, Bill, the important thing is to set up some quality control feedback loops in the system.
Right, oversight.
Yeah, actually, we've done this.
He's been doing this all my life. You can't tell.
I know it's impossible. It's impossible. Sorry, I got in the middle of that. I know the reality. Okay. Suzanne, if you come forward and we have a hand from the public.
I'd like to, SRSA has a book that they recommend. It's on the top of the reading list. It's called Boards That Make a Difference. And I don't have the author's name right on the front of my brain, but he talks about committees in there. And I think it's really important to read about this, because when you have a manager form of government, your job is governance only. So when I hear that you have a personnel committee, he's saying that you never have personnel committees, because that's the one job that your administrator is responsible for. The only time you do a personnel committee, if it's ad hoc, if there's some necessary reason, and it could involve like the administrator, maybe direct reports to you, but you don't want to have a standing personnel committee, because that's the one committee that people violate the sanctity of your role of the CEO. So let me just say, I'll read one little portion here. Protection of the role of the CEO. Board committees are established to aid in the process of governance, not management. And you're saying governance out of one corner of your mouth, but it kind of sounds like you're talking about oversight and management. This simple rule safeguards the board CEO accountability relationship. When board committees are assigned tasks to make them oversee, become involved in, or advise on management functions, it becomes less clear who's in charge of these activities. Personnel, executive, and finance committees are habitual offenders. The CEO role deteriorates as a result of these committees' well-intended interference. The board's ability to hold the CEO accountable deteriorates at pace. And then it says, unfortunately, many board committees are actually designed to be involved in staff level issues. This is bound to occur when the boards themselves are involved below their level. So it goes on, but this is something you have to be very careful of. And you guys might feel very confident right now. But what happens when that next board comes in that's full of bozos and they're taking on these committee roles? And you might be very clear about what you want to do, but you're setting up a structure that successive boards might become involved in too. So you have to think very carefully. It also might make it hard to hire an administrator. They look at you and they see a lot of like meddling from the board. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but really think, what is governance? What is governance? What would that actually mean? John Norris seemed to be very heavily involved in public works. And it sounded like there was a role for you guys doing personnel and stuff at that time, but I think we have a different setup. I would advise you put the town administrator's contract on the town website with the other contracts so we can all become clear of what her job is. Because that way, maybe you'll be less likely to step on our toes, but that's the most important contract we have and it's not available for the public review. Thanks.
Go ahead, Jeff.
If I may, I just wanted to provide a few points on the creation of committees. You know, committees can serve a very useful role, but as was stated by a few commenters tonight, you know, some of the concerns that we want to be mindful of in forming any committee and delineating what its duties are to ensure that they're not doing the work at staff and not directing staff. That's you know, the job of the board to direct the administrator, who then can direct staff. Two, I'd like just, you know, would want you all to be mindful of all open meetings law requirements with the committees and meetings of those committees and the work that those committees are doing. And then, you know, again, lastly, well, I guess my third comment was more so to reiterate just some caution in ensuring that there's a separation between the work that trustees are doing as trustees and the work that the staff has been hired to do as well.
Thank you. No further comments?
There's been for the personnel committee did not mess around with personnel. This is what they did: develop personnel policies, present them to the rest of the board for approval, and articulate them in the personnel manual. Budget for town administrative staff, considering needs and resources, and report it to the board. Assist in hiring and interviewing when asked by the mayor or department heads, and be an appellant for employee concerns and problems when requested by an employee, a department head, or mayor. And so, and do a review of review contractors to provide administrative support to the town, and then present that to the board. So the personnel committee never actually messed around with any of the personnel. We were dealing with policy level decisions for the personnel. And in many cases, what the committee did was what was asked by the town manager or the town administrator for us to do. In other words, she would come to us and she'd say, "We got this problem in streets. Can you guys deal with it?" It takes a load off her, right? And it takes the heat off her too.
Thank you. The motion on the table is that trustee committees be reconstituted as they were in 2002. Those committees were finance, water, sewer, trash, public safety, streets, personnel, and parks. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone?
Nay.
Anyone opposed? Nay, and a nay for my vote.
Can I do a follow-up motion?
Just a second.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. We're at 9:18, and I'm trying to respect Trustee Markle's request. He's been very patient about how did we do in the meetings, and we have not approved disbursements, which is critical because we need to sign checks tomorrow. I'm sorry?
I would strongly recommend that the board get to the executive session item on the PACE litigation. We're at a point from the town's insurance council where they're wanting to try to wrap up the settlement of that case. And so time is of the essence on that matter.
Thank you. So could we do disbursements?
Yes. Yeah.
And then get to the executive session?
Yep.
So what if I gave Paige a shot? So.
Oh,
man. Now you have to find it.
I know.
There it is.
There it is, okay.
There.
I make a motion to approve disbursements, including accounts payable at $31,751.21. Transfer to Summit, $100,000. Transfer to payroll, $26,397.78. Payroll taxes, $20,023.17. Transfer from Ox, $26,397.78. Payroll direct deposits, $26,000 minus $26,397.78.
Is there a second? Okay. Any discussion from the board? Any discussion from the public on disbursements? All in favor of disbursements as read?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, then that passes. I would like to move to how do we do and then move to the executive session. So,
Okay.
Thomas, do you want to take the discussion away from us?
I would love to talk about how we've been operating. I feel like one, I'd like to ask the board's permission to change our seating arrangement for our next meeting. And I don't think a motion is necessary for that. If you don't know, I can make it. But
Switch it up.
yeah, well, exactly. Basically, my understanding is that what we're here to do is try and have a conversation, directed and disciplined conversation between trustees. And I find it really difficult to express myself and hear and to see, to appreciate how this works. So I think if we do like a smaller circle of tables, basically do four in the center here. And yeah, I'll do it next time, but with your permission, I'd like to try it. And aside from that, I'd also like to continue my analysis of the meeting time, and I think everybody had time to see that. Yeah, I think it can really save us a lot of headaches and guesswork. I was able to produce those because that company allows 5 free trials. So they had a $25 a month subscription where I could do, I think it's 20 meetings a month. So I'd be able to get the backlog of all the previous meetings as well, probably within a month or two. So with your permission, I don't know if you guys want to pay for it, I'm fine paying for it for a month out of my own pocket, out of the money that's paid. So I'd like to continue on that and continue to present those analyses to the board.
That should probably be a motion since we're expanding.
Yeah, you think, well, I mean, I don't know if you want to, if you think it's appropriate that the board pay for it.
I take a motion that we do a time analysis of our meetings as recommended by Tom.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion from the board?
Who's going to pay for it?
And then we pay for it.
I mean, I'll
if
pay
we're
for
going to do it, then we pay. For it.
The town?
It's a town expense.
A town expense.
Town expense. So it'd be a $25 a month license to CAD.com.
So if people are not familiar with what he's talking about, there's a computer program that actually analyzes the meetings and pulls makes it much more thorough. I say
Well, it's not a
quantitative.
program. Actually, I could send it. Samara, can you get a link? If I email a link to you, can you show it on the projector? How do I get that to you?
I've downloaded. I've got both of those. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
I'm sorry, I'm double checking with her. I know there's a. Send it to TOP.
While that's going on, one of the things I thought your motion was about how do we do during this meeting? If we have evaluation of the meeting we just
Yeah,
conducted.
I feel like, those were my statements before to this part.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think that in general, I really appreciate your listening. I feel like you've been very attentive and make sure that everybody is being heard. I feel like the pace is a little bit slow, and I think maybe limitation on the rounds, because I've seen a lot of here and there, here and there, here and there, and that's taking us. Yeah, so I really appreciate your energy and comments. I would like to see, I think it would be more productive to have a bit more structure in discussion.
Thank you.
On your previous point, Thomas, we did randomize seating and it worked. Yeah, to actually just the clerk would just like put out the name tags, we come in and find our seat.
One thing with that, I really prefer to sit here because I'm deaf in my right ear. It's very difficult for me down there to hear. It's a good point. And my neck gets tired swimming. And I miss a lot. That's the biggest.
Yeah, that's the worst part of it. Anything else? Any comments from the public on how we did tonight?
They aren't yelling, they have no pitchforks.
I do want to concur with Thomas Markle, and I appreciated Dave Gleason in his role as mayor. But you were trying to kind of keep, but yeah, mayor pro tem or chair, let's say, and you were trying to keep track of things. But I think your calmness was appreciated. So thank you.
No one sees how fired up I am inside. So we really need to do the executive session, but before we do that, I did hear one of the board members saying that they think we need to get back at this business special meeting. So
I'd like to make a motion that we have a special meeting, leave the date open to schedules, to finish the work that we didn't complete tonight.
is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Okay, so there's not a date certain for a special meeting. I'm concerned about how the mechanics would have to work, just the post things. And those kind of things.
That's,
It's best if we
that's why I'm leaving that a little bit open, and everybody has to be able to make the date.
I know, that's the problem, so we need to correlate our calendar.
Well, open meetings law has a specific exemption for scheduling meetings. So we can do this on through email. So,
I was gonna say, you could, Corinne could email you guys to determine availability for a special meeting. And then, of course, you just need to post, notice an agenda at least 24 hours in advance.
The problem is I will be out of town until the 8th of June, which is the day before our next meeting. Yeah, so that's an issue. You lose me as a board member, that may be beneficial. So.
Can I just ask a comment about that special meeting?
Yeah.
Is it only to do the agenda items that are in this agenda that we did not finish? So it would certainly not be a very long meeting. Okay. Okay. So we could do committee
The motion's
reports.
been made and seconded that we have a special meeting coordinated by Corinne to finish up the agenda items that we have. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? So now I'd like to entertain a motion to move into executive session.
okay.
Who has a question? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, two things. First, you had a motion in a second about the time to you guys vote on it. Because we didn't get a vote.
Yeah, we've, talking about, yes. you're
Yes, and on the $25 a month.
Yes. We went back, we ended up stacking
We did.
motions.
We did.
And it's obviously, I turned into a pumpkin in 3 minutes. So
And we'll have to do an extension of the meeting before you go into executive session.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we did not vote on the motion to allow Thomas's software and to pay for the software. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we're done there. And then I'm losing it.
Extend.
Okay, well, let's look at that. All right, so
We extend the meeting for the
Motion,
executive
thank you, Rick.
Second.
All in favor of extending the meeting?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so now,
I move to go into executive session or conference with the city town attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions under CRS section 24-6-4024.
Is there a second?
Say specific to Eric Pace, town Paonia.
No, actually, we don't, all we have to do is go in for legal purposes.
Yeah. it's supposed to.
Yeah,
So
necessary.
let me restate the motion for a conference with the town attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions. CRS 24 for specific to Eric case for the town. Second.
Sorry, did you say for the, it was hard to hear. Did you say specifically to address that litigation? A
Yes.
requirement of the open meetings laws to with as much specificity as possible, the purpose.
To address, I'm sorry. the wording
I just
of
wanted to
the-
make sure you referenced that it's to discuss the Eric
Litigation.
case litigation.
That's not necessary.
It is necessary.
So
That's fine.
do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion for a conference with the town attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions under CRS 24-6/42 be specific to litigation with Eric Pace versus the town. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
He didn't do the name. Just going.
Did you do a roll call in there?
Oh.
Come out, so I know. In there.
There was a roll call.
There was. She asked if we did a roll call in the executive session.
Yes, we did.
All right.
We're resuming our open meeting.
All right, the time is now 9:48
Barely
p.m.
speaking.
Time is now 9:48 p.m. and the executive session has concluded. The participants in the executive session were Trustee Stelter, Trustee Markle, Trustee Weber, Trustee Smith, Trustee Valentine, Trustee Knudsen, Attorney Conklin, Town Administrator Ferguson, and Mayor Backren. For the record, if any person who participated in the executive session believes that any substantial discussion of any matters not included in the motion to go into executive session occurred during the executive session, or that improper action occurred during the executive session in violation of the open meetings law, I would ask that you state your concerns for the record. Okay, hearing none, I think we have a motion.
I make a motion that we direct our attorney to tell Sursa that we're in agreement with the terms of the settlement.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's 2.5 seconds.
Okay, yeah, John, he's really like.
John, we have this one.
Any discussion from the board? All in favor?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
are you rubber stamping something you talked about?
I didn't see your hand go up. Please come on. See it? I do see it now.
So you're obviously rubber stamping discussion we had in the executive session. I don't see any way to keep you from doing that. There should be a discussion of what went on in there that makes clear what it is you're in agreement with. And I'm just going to say, Eric Pace got railroaded by the town of Paonia, and is a perfect example of when a little guy goes up against a big guy. There's no justice for the little guy. I don't know exactly where this case is now. I read a decision recently, I guess it's the same case, where he was getting drugged because he had not been able to engage counsel until statute of limitations had run out. And he was, I believe, ordered to pay town's legal expenses. And you don't have to do that. And if that's what this is about, you're doing the wrong thing if you make him do that. And it's bad. It's bad.
Okay, there's been a mediation and Eric is not paying the town.
Okay, that's fair.
And there's a settlement. I'm not at liberty to discuss the details to it. There may be a confidentiality agreement with Sursa. Now, Sursa did this. They mediated it with Eric and his legal counsel, I would assume. And what they wanted was us to approve going forward with a mediated agreement. And that's what we're doing.
And there will be a settlement agreement that comes to us that we will approve in a public meeting.
And we will discuss it at length at that time.
So this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to come out of the meeting. You're not supposed to rubber stamp it. You're supposed to talk about what you're doing.
And thank you. Thanks for bringing it up. Any other comments, questions? I think I will hit the chime for the last time.
No vote.
Did you guys vote on that?
We have to vote on it.
Oh, we have to vote on it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
We're getting tired.
We are kind of tired. Do we make good decisions after 9:30?
No, we don't.
Good night, everybody.
Okay. I always, I see it out too much, sorry.
The reason I can tell is they're up there. All the ones that I did.